How do you prove a black hole? How do you know those gravitational waves proved the collision of two black holes?
Somehow, eventually, they are able to observe phenomena.
No, they can't observe. It's too far away. It's too theoretical. How do we know what they're saying is true? You know what it really is? It's all science fiction.
So does that make you a skeptic?
No, well, science fiction says, this is a story that I'm making up. And there's this thing called wormholes. And that's a science fiction concept. Although these scientists say there are wormholes. How do you know?
I do find that science fiction often begets science fact, though. Look at Star Trek. What did Star Trek predicted now is common today.
But did science fiction beget science, or did science beget the science fiction?
Science is a liar sometimes.
Oh, boy.
This is Aristotle, thought to be the smartest man on the planet. He believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and everybody believed him because he was so smart. Until another smartest guy came around, Galileo, and he disproved that theory, making Aristotle and everybody else on Earth look like a bitch. Of course, Galileo then thought comets were an optical illusion, and there's no way that the moon could cause the ocean's tides. Everybody believed that because he was so smart. He was also wrong, making him and everyone else on Earth look like a bitch again. And then, best of all, Sir Isaac Newton gets born and blows everybody's nips off with his big brains. Of course, he also thought he could turn metal into gold and died eating mercury, making him yet another stupid bitch. Are you seeing a pattern?
No.
Mr. Reynolds, these were all the smartest scientists on the planet. Only problem is, they kept being wrong. Sometimes.
Oh, this is insane, you fool!
I'm a fool because I have more faith in the saints that wrote the Bible?
Yeah, because you just read the words of a bunch of guys that you never met, and you just take it on faith that everything they wrote was true.
And what makes you think what your scientists are writing is any more truer than my saints?
Because there are volumes of proven data, numbers, figures. There are fossil records.
Oh, fossil records. Ah! I didn't even think about the fossil records. I guess I'll concede. Oh, wait, one more thing before I do, Mr. Reynolds. Have you seen these fossil records?
Have I? Huh?
Have you poured through the data yourself? The numbers, the figures?
Well, no. No.
Oh, interesting. So let me get this straight, Mr. Reynolds. You get your information from a book written by men you've never met, and you take their words as truth based on a willingness to believe, a desire to accept, a leap of, dare I say it, faith?
Come on. Look, I don't even know how I'm supposed
By Donald Couchman and Eric Schultz. I said, welcome.
Hello, the name is Mark Sargent. That's what I'm wrong. Now that's going to be a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best.
Oh.
Okay, I just wanted to draw, council members, thank you for listening. I want to draw the public's attention to what may be an extremely egregious example of malfeasance, and just to help illustrate the gravity of the situation, imagine if the federal government gave $19.5 billion to Hollywood. I think we'd all be pretty upset by this. Well, there is a growing body of evidence that the International Space Station is not in outer space, but it's being filmed in a desalinated pool down here on Earth, and it's being falsely misrepresented. And this started with this phenomenon known as bubbles in space. If you search for it, you'll see many of these so-called spacewalks, which have been falsely misrepresented as live, as has been exposed many times on Facebook when they do their live ISS feeds. Bubbles out in space. Well, there's not supposed to be water up there. And it is known that the astronauts do train in these big underwater tanks. And so this body of evidence, and it's not just bubbles in space, there are harnesses, there are green screens, evidence of flights that are actually on parabolic flights, not in space. And if this is true, it's a big deal, because that's a lot of money that could be used for our own infrastructure or schools, whatever. So I'm drawing the attention to it because I think it's something that deserves to be looked at, because if it's true, these bubbles in space might represent the smoking gun in probably the biggest hoax since global warming. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. Mr. Couchman, followed by Eric Schultz, followed by Mike Alvarez. Welcome.
Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Блять, хуесосы летают на тросах, сука, тросы за трусы. Полетели, блядь, весы. Вы хуёвые актеры, режиссеры, полудурки. Все ваши зрители, пациенты, дурки. На МКС что-то дохуя чудес. То ебало исчезает, то предмет из рук исчез. Там гитары, там игрушки, блядь, на тросах кувырки. Как вы, сука, заебали, ёбаные мудаки. Нахуй, 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 нахуй. Идите вы все, пидорасы. Нахуй, 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 нахуй. Идите вы все. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. Космонавты говно, суки, заебали. В открытый космос выход в бассейне снимают. Тупые ихтиандры жопой пузыри пускают. Их скафандры акваланги. Выйди из баллона и засуньте в жопу шланги. Бомбосъемки, зеленый.
In 1986, the shuttle Challenger exploded about 74 seconds after takeoff, killing all 7 astronauts inside. Or did it? It turns out that 6 of the 7 are still alive and kicking today. Ellison Onizuka claims to be his identical twin brother, Claude. Yeah, I've got an identical twin brother, Claude, too. The Challenger pilot, Mickey Smith, hasn't even bothered changing his name. He's now Professor Michael J. Smith of University of Wisconsin. Now, Krista McAuliffe was a bit of a sneaky one. She was the Challenger payload specialist, quite famous for being a teacher. It turns out during her astronaut days she was using her middle name, Krista, and now she goes by her first name, Sharon, and she's a Syracuse law professor. The Challenger commander, Francis Richard Scobie, is now Dick Scobie, which sounds like a rather unpleasant disease, CEO of Cows in Trees Limited. Judith Resnick, the Challenger mission specialist, again hasn't even bothered changing her name. She's a professor at Yale Law. And finally, Ronald McNair, another Challenger mission specialist, claims to be his identical twin brother, Carl McNair. What are the odds?
UHF is good. Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars. Time to see where our curiosity will take us.
Dr. Stelzner is been the father and the mother and everything in between of the landing system we've built, and certainly has been its biggest proponent.
Tell us about the landing.
All right, Greg. I can't tell you too much about it. I mean, it looks good. I'm being a little flip. In short, it looked extremely clean. Very nominal, remarkably good. Our navigation error was on the low side of our expectation, which meant that we probably had a good alignment between the celestial sensors and the inertial sensors, the IMU. Our powered flight appears to have been excellent. If my good friend Ben Toma is in the house, is Ben in the house? We landed with 140 kilograms of fuel reserves out of a total of 400 kilos that we carried in. And Ben worked quite diligently in stretching the tanks at my insistence because I was worried we wouldn't have enough fuel. And so I think I owe Ben a little bit of an apology there. So it looked good, in short. Good and clean. And it looks, at least by my eyeball, that we landed in a nice, flat spot. Beautiful. Really beautiful.
Shani Jardin from boingboing.net, and I'm a stand-in for Miles O'Brien with PBS NewsHour tonight.
You look more attractive than Miles.
I won't tell him that, Adam.
Okay.
I think he heard it.
What? I have to ask you, what kind of file type, can you tell us about the image file type and compression that was used to send this very important couple of thumbnails back from Mars?
Yes, unfortunately, I absolutely cannot. If Justin Mackey is in the room, or there's a couple other people on the team who'd be able to whip that out quickly, but I couldn't tell you. Sorry.
Okay, we're going across the aisle over here, and just wait for the mic runner right there. Thank you.
Hi, Sally Rail with the Planetary Society, and this is for Adam. Two very quick questions. Well, first one's quick. Are you going to call your daughter Curiosity?
It is true that I think that curiosity is perhaps the central defining human attribute. I really do. And Richard and I were both part of a group of people who were in the process of helping winnow down the names of the school kids had taken. And there was, I don't know, a couple hundred that we looked at. And curiosity was one of them. And I was smitten from the moment I saw that. And I'm so happy that the rover is Curiosity.
Okay, the next question is a little more than 48 hours ago.
Carla's right there.
Come on, Carla, stand up.
Stand up.
Stand up. Go ahead.
My daughter's name will not be Curiosity.
Okay, a serious question. A little more than 48 hours ago, you told me you would tell me a secret. Once Curiosity landed. Can I have my secret?
Yeah, what was this? A lot has happened in the last 48 hours.
Come on.
And to be very truthful, I do not recall what that secret was.
I'm going to hold you to this.
The unmanned spaceflight website has coordinates for the landing that go down to something like 5 decimal points. I just wanted to confirm with you that that you do have those sort of coordinates. And am I reading those coordinates correctly when I see that it looks as though you've landed within 500 meters of the skirt around the mountain? That, I mean, you're really very close to the mountain at the closer end in the landing ellipse, and possibly within striking distance of the phyllosilicate trench.
I can't confirm that. My estimate, I'm looking for somebody, yes, there's somebody in the audience here who has that in the tip of their noggin. We should have soon that estimate, but I don't have it to 5 decimal places. We wouldn't report it to that because we're certain that we don't know it to that. And I don't know what the unmannedspaceflight.com estimate is.
Can you tell us at what time Curiosity touched down, Earth received time, and at what time the first image came back?
I can tell you the first of those is 10:39 p.m. The second of those I don't have.
And what a bargain that we got this mission for. This movie costed you less than $7 per American citizen. And look at the excitement that we have brought.
So which one of you is ready to go to Mars? Are you ready? And I think you're ready. I know you're ready, right? We just discussed that. She'd like to go to Mars very quickly. Who's ready to go to Mars up there?
Here we have a nice motivational poster. It says accomplishments. You can fool all of the people all of the time if your effects budget is large enough. Ain't that the truth? And if you have the free pass of being scientific. So anything you say, any explanation you'll give is taken by the community to be fact, even though you're liars. Now, I'm absolutely positive that anybody in their right mind would have to agree that if we did go to the moon, it was man's greatest achievement. Imagine how well kept those records would be. Well, I hope you've done your research and know that NASA has lost all the data, the blueprints, the records from the Apollo missions. Lost them. Following the Freedom of Information requests in America, NASA admitted it had lost all the original video footage of the Apollo missions. Unfortunately, it isn't just the video footage that's missing. Also, allegedly, beamed back from the moon was the voice data, the biomedical monitoring data, the telemetry data that monitored the location and the functioning of the spaceship. All of that data, the entire alleged record of the moon landings, was on 13,000 plus reels that are missing. They're gone. Also missing, according to NASA and its various subcontractors, are all the original plans and the blueprints for all the lunar modules, for the spacesuits and for the lunar rovers, and the entire multi-sectioned Saturn V rocket. And you just allow that. It's a joke. And this is exactly what I mean when I say they've got a get-out-of-jail-free card. I mean, what if religion said, we have proof of God on 13,000 reels of video footage, but we lost it? We have all the blueprints of how he made the world, but we lost it. Sorry. And this isn't just like a box or 2 boxes. This is over 900 boxes. You don't lose 900 boxes unless you lose them on purpose. I mean, what is this picture that shows a man drawing the moon on a big screen, making sure it's meticulous and perfect, with a track next to it? I mean, what do you think that picture is of? Does this seem possible? Take a look at each Apollo mission and look at the amount of time they spent on the moon's surface doing their little projects. Then look at the amount of photos that they took. That averages out to about a photo a minute. I think it's even less than that. I mean, look at Apollo 16, for example. 1,214 minutes on the moon's surface. They brought back 1,765 photos. Go watch the video of Apollo 16 and how much time they weren't taking photos. Then tell me if that's possible. Now, during Apollo 11, guess how many times either Houston or Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin mentioned taking a photo of the Earth? 0. You would think that'd be kind of important, being the first time they've been there. You would think that'd be the one picture that they absolutely needed to get. It's never mentioned.
You really like attention, don't you? You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
You want me to knock you in the head?
Well, I want you to swear to God on the Bible that you walked on the moon.
Okay.
If you walked on the moon, we're given the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to get the hell knocked out of you if you don't leave me alone.
So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Cybro, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator in NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get... I'm heading out. I appreciate it. And get the hell out of the black house.
When the shadows in the wrong place, I don't give a damn about all that shit.
You're full of shit.
Of lunar orbit being falsified.
Being falsified?
Correct. We got an unedited tape from a source at the Johnson Space Center.
Totally nonsense. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
We found a very unique reel of footage that we have queued up to show you.
Yeah.
And it's from the mission. And to our knowledge, no one has ever seen it before. And it's 30 years old.
And you want me to see this while you have me on camera?
Well, and to tell us what it is. I mean, it's...
Well, I don't know why I should do that.
Go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
No matter how obvious it was that they staged the moon landings, and no matter how many times they rub it in our faces in the mainstream media, many people have been bamboozled into believing that landing on the moon 6 times in the span of 3 years is entirely possible. They also think it's reasonable that we haven't even thought of going back in over 45 years. And the fact that NASA has repeatedly admitted that we can't go past low Earth orbit.
This next generation spacecraft will enable America to explore beyond low Earth orbit.
We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go.
The kinds of technologies that we're testing out on Space Station are definitely helping us with our goals of going beyond low Earth orbit.
Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
Low Earth orbit is between 99 miles and 1,200 miles away. The moon is claimed to be 238,000 miles away. That's a big difference. How was it so easy to go to the moon in 1969 using this flimsy lunar module? Even more interesting, who was already on the moon filming the arrival of the module? Was it the same person who stayed back on the moon and filmed the departure of the module?
Stage pushed. Mission arm is S. Okay, I'm going to get to pro. 99, proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good. Ag thought.
Just wondering.
The Vector, NASA's official logo. If you've ever looked at NASA's official logo, both their official insignia and their official seal, you'll see that the most prominent object in the seal is a red swooshing object. They call that the chevron or the vector. If you ask NASA's Public Affairs Office, this symbology is featured so heavily in their insignia and seal, they'll give you what really amounts to the standard facile cover story for the unilluminated. They'll tell you that that is a representation of a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s, which was the time the logo was created. Not exactly the case. Someone might want to ask the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, that was formed in 1992, why they chose that same logo. And while you're at it, you can go ask the Chinese, who formed their space agency in 1996, why in the world they're using a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s as their official logo. Then you can ask the Japanese, the South Koreans, Taiwanese, Malaysia, Mexico, Iran, all of these countries, even Bulgaria. They all utilize the vector symbology in their space agency logos for their national space agencies. It gets even deeper. You can go and look at the individual manned program patches for NASA. The Mercury program, for example, a blatant use of covert symbology. In every logo dealing with the Mercury program, you'll see what looks like a number 7 in their logo. And again, NASA's official story is that they put this number 7 there so that they could pay homage to the original 7 Mercury astronauts. kind of forgetting the fact that only 6 Mercury astronauts actually flew into space, because number 7 never did. Deke Slayton had a heart problem, so he didn't get to go up. So there were only 6 Mercury astronauts, yet there's a 7 in every single logo. That's in the official mission or official program insignia for Mercury, as well as the 6 individual mission patches carry this logo. And it carries on to the space shuttle program. If you look at the Apollo logo has a big letter A in it. At least that's what they want you to believe, but it's not. Again, that's just a simple way of explaining away the inclusion of this vector symbology in the logo. If you go to the space shuttle program, the original space shuttle STS program patch is a triangular patch that, again, hides the use of the chevronic vector symbology. And that also goes for many of the STS-specific mission patches. Every single one of the International Space Station expedition patches carry the vector symbology. The Russian Mir space station used the vector symbology. That was their official logo. And you can even go deeper and look at military-industrial complex companies. Look at the logo on a company like Lockheed Martin, 2 vectors. The X-Prize logo, Ames Research Labs, U.S. Space Command. When you get into the military realm, the United States Space Command, their official logo is the vector symbol. And when you look at the military's individual space-specific programs, all of them deal with vector symbology in their official insignias. And the question really becomes, who or what are these people paying homage to? And the truth, quite frankly, is out of this world.
Steve Jobs is dead. He looks pretty active, healthy, robust, charismatic. And Stephen Hawking is still alive. I guess it pays to keep your mouth shut and do what you're told. That's amazing, eh? Smartest man alive. Holds all the answers about our universe and outer space and how it works. And he's also the least likely to go up in a rocket to check out his theories.
Sure.
When you hear Stephen Hawking talk, I mean, it's a robot voice. That's amazing. Back in 1980, he developed artificial intelligence just for one guy to push NASA. Artificial intelligence that could tap into his fucking brain
As he wants, or is gone to.
and read his thoughts so he could talk through a robo-filter.
The question of whether God is bound by the laws of science is a bit like your question.
You think that they would have fucking maybe installed online translator? Because if they said that was the smartest man in the universe, I don't know if everybody would believe him. So who's the real voice? It is Matt Boylan, a.k.a. Matthew Leonard Boylan, a.k.a. Dragonfly Supervisor, Agent M2 ZX10, Graphics Operational Manager for NASA. Been a comedian for about 20 years. It's been a front. I'm a high-realist painter, photorealist painter. Worked for NASA on and off doing freelance graphics for about 20 years now. And the quark in the second atom of the quasar in the black hole. NASA. As you can see, we got a nice red serpent tongue coming through there. NASA. And there's the UN flag. Also the symbol of the flat earth. Oh, of course, if I say flat earth, I gotta be an idiot, right? That's what they told you, right? It's a ball. There's no Antarctica in this. It's a bird's eye over the North Pole. Right in your fucking face. You know, there's gonna be some comedians making jokes tonight, but I want to talk about the joke that's on you. There's 5 UN Security Council members. You know how you become a UN Security Council member? You get the bomb. And they're all seated across from each other on the UN Security Council, deciding for every other fucking nation in the UN what to do. Like reservoir dogs pointing fucking guns at each other's head, securing the world. UN Security Council. What are they securing? Freedom, democracy, human rights, democracy. That's funny. So there's like 360 members of the UN or whatever, but only 5 countries decide what goes on for the world. Some democracy. Line number 1. That's what it takes to be a member. Have a bomb, nuke the planet, go up and take a look at what it really looks like. Outer space. There it is. There's your world. You know when they took that? 1969. First lunar mission to the moon. You know, the first lunar mission to the moon wasn't so much about going to the moon. It was about having an event so you can go high enough to take a picture after 500 years to prove it was a ball. They went to the moon before they crossed the Antarctic. The 2 most watched televised events in history. The moon landing and the towers falling. Up. Down. Oh, there they are. Moon landing, 8:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1969. Isaac Newton, 1666. 666-999-6666. Most people saw the lunar landing and they swear on it because they heard it on the radio. CBS put up screens all over in Central Park, along with NBC, you know, so they could work with groupthink dynamics. Reality is reinforced by group dynamics, witnessing an event. Now, is it really them halfway to the moon? Or they just turned out the lights in the cabin and pressed the camera up against a round window? Don't forget your flag of the world has no Antarctica and it's flat. But of course, to entertain that notion, you have to be an idiot. Right? Like they told you, Simon says. Well, I'm going to run you guys through a perception test to see if this crowd could discern between an image that's a painting by applause or a photo of reality. So by applause, how many people think this is a painting? Plus, how many people think this is a photo? It's a photo of a painting, but that's not the fucking argument. Next. It's a painting. Photo or painting? By applause, photo. By applause, painting. It's a painting by the artist photorealist Cesar Santander. Photo or painting? Painting. That's the photo. How do I know? I did it. Pause. Painting or photo? By applause, photo. By applause, painting. That's a photo that looks like a painting. Photo or painting? Painting. I did it. Pause. Photo or painting? Photo? By applause? By applause, painting? You're just fucking crap shooting in the casino now, aren't you? Painting, Richard Estes. Photo or painting? By applause, photo? That's a photo. Next. And that's my painting of the photo. Photo or painting? Photo? It's a photo. Pause. Photo or painting? It's a painting, I did it. I fucking did it. I own the copyright on all this shit. Pause. That's why I can monetize on YouTube. By the way, I own the NASA channel on YouTube. I swear to God. That's an official photo from NASA. By applause, how many people think that's a photo? By applause, how many people think this is bullshit? This is Ololapia, distant moon of Mercury. This is Ololapia without the shading from Adobe Photoshop. Good look at it. And this is the little section from an ice inlet in the Antarctic that I cut out, and I just cropped the fucking black circle out of construction paper and made a planet out of it. Oh, this is Pupapipia. This is a distant planet of Venus. As you can see here, you can see all the crater textures on my shirt. We can fucking make you think. Oh, this is amazing. These are supernovas. They never caught this many suns colliding and actually exploding at the same time by Hubble telescope. And I actually have a close-up of this. Amazing. This is actually the most distant shot they have of our galaxy. Here's a close-up. They came up with a new term for this, collisionary supernovas, because suns were actually meeting and exploding at the same time in a Christmas tree. This guy's pretty smart right there. This is Mars. This is the surface of Mars. Yeah, very sandy. Surface of Mars without the black background. And there you go. It's just a desert. Oh, this is sunrise on Star Trek. So it's a Hollywood image that looks real. Now, photo or painting? 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 How the fuck would you know? This is actual NASA. Here, pause. You see this cloud formation there? You see Africa? Do you see the shadow line on the top of Africa? Next image. They fucking reversed it our boys at NASA, they took the same image, they just flipped it. Get it? Like they flipped it, and they call it two different images. I'm not making this shit up. Well, people are gonna go, well, here's some footage of the Earth rotating, liar. So you got like, you can't see very well here with the light here, but you got like South America turning here. But what's interesting here is has this image been doctored by applause? Yes or no? Has it been doctored? Yeah, it's been sped up because South America at this speed is going to be around in 5 minutes. But what's interesting is the clouds are not morphing. Oh, it's spinning, but the artists are too lazy to show how fast the clouds will be morphing at that speed. Check it out. See that cluster of clouds? It's not fucking changing. And that's a real shot of the Earth spinning, but the clouds aren't changing. People go to me, what are you on? What did you fucking smoke? What drugs did you take? What drugs did the planet take? Because you're never gonna fucking know. If it's a fucking ball. So if I want to hide how much real estate there really is, I'll tell you this amount. You're never going to go to the South Pole to check out my theory.
Blue Marble 2.0. NASA's Rob Simon made this. Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is. A composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture. They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it's a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot. There's
artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Is a mirage. A lie is a lie, and it don't matter how many dumb sheeple believe it. And the truth is the truth, hiding right out in plain sight, and still people don't see it. Man, this shit got me hated, and I won't stop till the elite are being defeated. They keep us deceived about everything that we think, and they keep it a secret. What we're taught is not conducive with reality. Big bang, evolution, and there's gravity. I tell the truth, and then these motherfuckers laugh at me, telling me the earth is photoshopped because it has to be. Most people accept the deception happily, but what they're doing to us all is a tragedy. God created the heavens and the earth in a verse, but we're living in a Freemasonic galaxy.
So I get on Google, sure enough, every fucking image is a cartoon or a CGI, and you can tell right away, and no one had ever pointed that out to me, so I just never thought of it. So I started to feel like a dumbass, and I started actually kind of panicking, like, okay, where am I gonna find like the real pictures? This is getting weird now. Fake one. Okay, that's just fucking a cartoon. Where are the real pictures? Started to kind of freak me out. When I show that to other people, like, hey, if you Google Earth from space, it's all like cartoons and CGI. They're just like, so what, bro? Doesn't affect how much pussy I'm gonna eat tomorrow night. And how much beer I'm gonna drink, bro. It's like, yeah, but that means everything you think you know is bullshit. And they're like, doesn't matter, bro. I gotta go to work tomorrow.
curvature of the Earth eludes us. Either the Earth is much larger in circumference than we are told, or the curve just doesn't exist. People assume that there is a curve, but it's never really been proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
The surface of water is always level. This is just natural physics. We know this, that water, if unobstructed and uncontained, will flow outwards, finding it the easiest course to maintain its own level, right? So, but the Ball Earth model claims that the oceans are huge 100-mile walls of curved water curving around the ball. That's ridiculous. They say that gravity makes this possible, but you don't see that. You go to the beach and you see a completely flat horizon. You see water just ever so gently coming up on the shore.
So there's the pretty blue marble that NASA claims we are living on, with circumference of 24,901 and 3959 radius. So to find the curvature, you take 8 inches times your distance squared. That's 8 inches times your distance squared, and if you don't square the distance, you end up with this, and this is not what NASA has shown us. They have given us a beautiful blue marble that we love. So you get 8 inches for 1 mile, 32 inches in 2 miles, 16.6 feet with 5 miles, so on and so forth. So what I did is I shot this pier, which is in Daytona Beach, Florida, and as you can see, between the water and the walkway of the pier is about 12 to 16 feet based on the height of the people and the railing. So I started at Granada, which is 4.92 miles away, and I shot this, and based on that distance and the formula, there should be 16 feet of curvature, but obviously you can still see the entire gap under the walkway there between that and the water. So in addition to that, behind that pier is actually a lighthouse, which you can see right above the pier. You can see the light. That is 16 miles away from my location, and I shot that lighthouse. Now that lighthouse is 175 feet tall, and the curvature from 16 miles away should be 170 feet. You can clearly see about the entire lighthouse beyond that pier. So like I said, there should be 170 feet of curvature, but there's none. And those hotels there are even further. Those are in New Smyrna, which is 20 miles. If NASA is right and we do live on a ball, they're going to have to make up that curvature. If it's not in the 20 miles I'm shooting, well then that means it's got to be made up further on down the line. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say we live on this ball and then say, oh, you can't detect the curvature. Well, you got to detect it somewhere, because if it's not dropping here, it's going to have to drop even more down the lines in order to make that circle, that ball they say we live on. And it's pretty round. That blue marble they give us is perfectly round.
Lighthouses are one great example. The Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England, it's 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. Why can you still see it? Another one worth mentioning that people be familiar with is the Statue of Liberty. It stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. Now, if the Earth was a globe at the dimensions that they give us, that would put Lady Liberty at an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon.
Cameras with fisheye lenses, Hollywood movies, and NASA CGI are the closest we get to seeing curvature. The definition of a fisheye lens is an ultra-wide-angle lens that produces strong visual distortion to create a wide, panoramic, or hemispherical image.
When this lens is arranged sort of straight onto the horizon, it actually it doesn't have any weird curvature or distortion. It just looks ultra wide. There might be a little bit of distortion on the edges, but it looks just super wide. Whenever you start to tilt it upwards or downwards, that's where you get the curvature distortion. So if you tilt the lens upwards in relationship to the horizon, it's going to kind of curve up and create a bowl type effect. If you tilt it downward, it's going to create a sphere or a kind of an orb type effect.
Besides Hollywood movies and TV shows, these wide-angle camera lenses are the only reason you'll ever witness curvature. It's the very reason why most people believe they have seen curvature. People send me links to endless amounts of videos shot with GoPros. This skydiving video, for instance. False curve. Here's a video from a balloon that was launched by a high school in South Carolina. Doesn't that seem like a bit much to you? Because at 120,000 plus feet, there is no curvature when you use a normal lens that's not distorted whatsoever. Another go-to video for people looking for curvature is the Felix Baumgartner Red Bull jump from 2012. People really believe that they are seeing a genuine curve here, but it's simply a fisheye lens. Otherwise, New Mexico takes up most of the planet. Wake up, ladies and gentlemen. They say Felix jumped from 126,000 feet, and this is how much curve there is. But again, look at footage from 121,000 feet on a camera without distortion, and you'll see the world how it really is. Curveless. There is no curve to be found or measured, and there's hints sprinkled all over the place, like this popular study, for instance. A study conducted by Department of Geography Texas State University and Department of Geography Arizona State University concludes that the state of Kansas is flatter than a pancake. On a scale where 1.0 means perfect flatness, the calculated flatness of the pancake is approximately 0.957. That's pretty flat, but Kansas is 0.9997 flat over its length of 400 miles, a distance that should render 20 miles of curvature from one side to the other on a sphere that's 25,000 miles in circumference. Check out this NASA document describing a flat, motionless Earth. So I came across this paper. It's an official NASA document published in August 1988 called The Derivation and Definition of a Linear Aircraft Model. And it's jam-packed full of mathematic equations, formulas, and all sorts of other stuff that describe a linear aircraft model. What I found interesting was on page 35 it says this: concluding remarks. This report derives and defines a set of linearized system matrices for a rigid aircraft of constant mass flying in a stationary atmosphere over a flat, non-rotating Earth.
I found this photo from Grand Mere State Park. This is from Joshua Nowicki, and what you're seeing here is a mirage. We typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake that we're actually seeing a mirage of the Chicago skyline. Very interesting. Here's what's happening. This is a good example of a superior mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon. Should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image of that skyline back towards the viewer. And so typically we would not be able to see this. This image would be viewable from much, much higher in the sky up in space. But instead, we're able to see it on the Lake Michigan shore.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
Earth looks flat, it feels flat. The logical explanation is the Earth is flat, right? But once you get past the crazy talk, how do we know the Earth is round? But once you get past the crazy talk, how do we know the Earth is round? Proving them wrong is simple, though it took hundreds of years for science to figure it out in the first place. We know the Earth is round by observing it closely. If you watch a ship as it disappears over the horizon, the bottom will vanish first, and then the top disappears later. It looks like it's sinking, kind of. That's because the Earth is curved. The Greeks first realized this 2,500 years ago and spent hundreds of years attempting to explain it. First, mathematician Pythagoras looked at the moon and discovered a curve in the line dividing the light from the shadow on its surface. That line's called the terminator. A flat moon would have a straight line. The only explanation? The moon must be a sphere. Sometime later, Anaxagoras, while watching the moon during an eclipse, realized the shadow covering the moon, that must be coming from the Earth. And that shadow was definitely curved, so the Earth must be round. So the Earth must be round. So the Earth must be round. And still later, in about 350 BC, Aristotle noted that star constellations that were visible in Greece were hidden beyond the horizon in Egypt.
His conclusion yet again was the Earth must be a sphere, just like the moon.
Sidebar, notice humanity knew the Earth was round 1,800 years before 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Just debunking some grade school crap, don't worry about it. Just debunking some grade school crap, don't worry about it. Once these great thinkers realized the Earth was curved, they wanted to prove it. A Greek astronomer named Eratosthenes figured it out. On the summer solstice, the sun reaches a peak at the top of the sky. Eratosthenes went to 2 distant locations in Egypt on the solstice and measured shadows cast by tall towers in each place. Then, using some geometry, he could calculate the curvature of the Earth between those 2 places. From there, he could extrapolate how many degrees around the circle of the Earth he had moved, ultimately revealing the circumference and diameter of the whole planet. Dang, Eratosthenes.
So by taking a shadow length and knowing the distance between the sticks, you could theoretically work out the circumference of the Earth. This method requires that the sun be a long, long way away so that the light coming from the sun is all parallel. However, it turns out that you'd get exactly the same results on a flat Earth if the sun were only 3,100 miles away and 34 miles across.
Thanks to all these ancient humans, we know the Earth is just a bit over 40,000 kilometers around the poles, which is also supported by modern observations. And knowing that, we can determine how far the horizon is from you at any given point, which changes depending on how high above sea level you are.
It's flat at sea level, it's flat from the top of Mount Everest, it's flat from over 20 miles high.
The Earth is curved, and we know it. The Earth is curved, and we know it.
The Earth is curved, and we know it.
In the end, the problem is flat earthers don't trust science. When the Flat Earth Society was founded in the mid-1920s, the idea was that observation trumps all. This is called the zetetic philosophy. Many skeptics believe the same. You can see it all over the internet. If the Earth looks flat, it must be flat, and often these skeptics cry, "Prove me wrong!" Only trust your own observations. The funny thing about that argument is that it was observation that showed us the Earth's curvature in the first place. Pythagoras observed that shadow line across the moon. Countless people have observed ships sailing underneath the horizon, not to mention the fact that we've gone to space and observed a very spherical Earth from above.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
And if you don't believe all of those scientists and government people for some reason, go make your own observation. Climb a mountain. Watch a ship sail over the horizon. Watch the sunset with a friend. fly in an airplane and behold an inarguably spherical Earth. Your move, Bob. Conspiracy theories are just the best, aren't they? Have you ever wondered why people love 9/11 conspiracies, or why we're so obsessed with the Illuminati, or which conspiracy theories might actually be true?
The flat Earth model is a working model. It's by no means definitive due to the nature of this massive cover-up. For the past 500 years, we've been completely buying into the Copernicus heliocentric model, but what we do know about the flat Earth is based on the azimuthal equidistant map that seems to be working out. This map goes as far back as the year 1000 and possibly earlier, now used as an official map by the US Geological Survey and also as the official logo for the United Nations. Is this our real home being hidden from us in plain sight? I think it is. The first thing a lot of people say is, where's the edge? Well, look at this map where Antarctica is a 360-degree ice barrier that holds the water in. These ice walls are real and they stand 150 feet above the surface of the water. Then you need to understand that there is no independent access to Antarctica. Average people can only go there on a guided tour. It has no towns, no cities, and no permanent residences. What's past the 150-foot ice wall is anyone's guess. How far the ice extends, how it terminates, and what exists beyond it. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 by 12 nations and more later on, states that Antarctica is for peaceful purposes only. No military activities, just scientific research and government exploration. Expeditions by any party must be discussed in advance. It's the longest and most successful treaty between nations. The treaty also states that there are ships, stations, and equipment to ensure compliance of the treaty. Sounds like military activity to me. Anyway, so this azimuthal equidistant map appears to be correct for the most part. Over the centuries, there's been other maps that look pretty close to it as well. Let's look at an interesting story that was recently in the news that supports this flat map. A woman gave birth on a flight from Bali to Los Angeles, so the flight made an emergency landing in Alaska. Here's what it would look like on a globe. Now, here's what it would look like on a flat Earth. Which one makes more sense? Exactly. A big issue I was having with the flat Earth for the longest time was the sunrise and sunsets. I realized that it was a perspective issue. First, you must understand that the sun is not 93 million miles away. If it was, we would never see anything like this here. This is concentrated because it's closer. It's much more probable that the sun is only a few thousand miles away and that it's the same size as the moon. Once you comprehend this, all of the sudden, solar eclipses make sense. Holy fucking shit! Something that makes sense! Okay, so the sun is close, which gives it the ability to spotlight the area that it's over, and when it leaves your view, due to perspective, it takes the light with it. There is a generous amount of light where the sun is at, but since it's so close, it doesn't spread its light like it would if it were bigger and further. The sun circumnavigates the Earth like a huge clockwork. Sometimes that takes a while to sink in. Alright, let's talk about the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect states that when a moving object leaves the ground, the Earth continues to rotate, meaning that when shooting a gun at a certain distance, the bullet would be a little off due to the Earth's rotation. If that's the case, then airplanes would have to account for the Coriolis effect, but they don't. This is only a few things that work better on a flat, motionless Earth. Do you need 100 excuses as to why you're not feeling any motion or seeing any curvature? Are those excuses easier to believe? Or is it easier to use Occam's razor and go with what our senses are telling us? The Earth is flat and not spinning.
I'd like to be an explorer, like the Great Magellan.
Oh, you're too late. There's really nothing left to explore.
Right before your surgery, I asked if you had packed your cell phone, and you said, which one?
When? Skylar, I was medicated. I mean, I could have said the world was flat.
You know what I think? I think you accidentally told the truth.
The world was flat.
You know what I think? You accidentally told the truth.
Here's our flat Earth with our magnetic center. This is the shoreline that we call Antarctica that surrounds our world. And here's my boat. I put my boat down and immediately the compass points north. If I want to circumnavigate, I want to head west or east, but we're going to go west right now. So I'm heading west, and as you see, west keeps turning. So I have to keep going, and this is how, when you go west, you end up going all the way back to where you started from. Same thing for east. I go east, I keep having to turn because my compass keeps making me turn to go east. If I want to go dead reckoning west, so this would be dead reckoning west. If you watch the compass, I'm no longer going west, I'm going south. Any straight line on the flat Earth will eventually become south. And that is how you circumnavigate on the flat Earth. Nobody can circumnavigate south, because when you go south, you keep on going. North, and as I pass North Pole, I'm now going south, even though I'm going in the same straight line.
all other proofs aside, the differences between the globe and the flat Earth become apparent when considering distances south of the equator. After all, haven't navigators, geographers, and map makers mapped these areas? And shouldn't they have noticed this quirk by now, if the Earth is indeed flat? Well, the reality is, the rabbit hole just gets deeper from here. So, to begin, the distance between Sydney, Australia and Nelson, New Zealand, on the ball Earth, given their coordinates and sparing you the spherical trigonometry, should be 1,310 miles. But the Australian Handbook, Almanac Shippers and Importers Directory states the measured distance as being 1,550 miles, which is a full 18% longer. And while on the ball Earth model, Antarctica is said to be a continent of ice situated at the bottom of the ball from 78 degrees south latitude, it should therefore not have a perimeter greater than 12,000 miles. However, early explorers like Captain Cook and James Clark Ross, in attempting to circumnavigate Antarctica, took 3 to 4 years to do so, and clocked in the distance traveled at 50 to 60,000 miles. That's twice the circumference of the equator. But the real proof for the flat Earth map is in the flight paths. On the ball Earth, several flights would have their shortest, quickest, and straightest path over or around the Antarctic continent. But instead, these flights take all manner of tangential detours, crossing into the northern hemisphere to refuel. Their reason? Antarctica's too cold, they claim. Well, I'm not buying it. When they claim there are bases with working machinery set up all over Antarctica. So let's just take a look at the actual flight paths and see what they have to disclose. One flight that should be a simple 11-hour shot across the Indian Ocean is from Johannesburg, South Africa to Perth, Australia. However, this flight takes a detour north, stopping in either Dubai, Hong Kong, or Malaysia to refuel, for a total flight time averaging over 18 hours. This ridiculously wayward detour is frustrating to say the least, but on the flat Earth map starts to make sense. Another quick and easy flight, you would think, is from Johannesburg to Santiago, Chile. While an easy 12-hour flight below the Tropic of Capricorn is to be expected, instead, every flight crosses the equator to refuel in Senegal, all the way near the Tropic of Cancer, for a total flight time of 19 hours. Though it doesn't make sense on the globe, as you can see it fits perfectly on the flat Earth map. A third flight from Johannesburg is to Sao Paulo, Brazil, which should be a direct 10-hour flight across the 25th degree south latitude. But instead, every flight crosses into the north to stop in London to refuel, making the total flight time 24 hours. From Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia, a straight 15-hour flight across the South Pacific is expected, despite refueling options in either New Zealand or any island in the South Pacific. The flight stops all the way at Los Angeles to refuel before continuing south to its destination. As already stated, these detours make no sense on the globe, but are explained and work perfectly well on the flat Earth map, having the North Pole at the center.
If you ask any scientist about his opinion about the flat Earth, he will ask you this: how do the sunrise and sunset work on the flat Earth model? And the flat earther will answer, perspective. Well, that is not enough. I mean, perspective is just a little part of the answer, but it's not enough. So the scientist here debunks the entire model with one question. That was my only problem ever since I started to study this flat Earth model. I knew it was not the only reason why the sun disappears the more it moves away from us. If you take a look at any animation of the flat Earth, the atmosphere is always missing. It's like drawing the flat Earth in a vacuum of space. And this is why the sun never sits on the flat earth because there is no refraction. Now my question is, have you ever seen an animation of the globe earth model with the effect of the atmosphere? I'm not talking about just drawing the clouds or the air. It's not just drawing them. It's how to make them work as they do in real life. You know what I mean? They know how the refraction works and they know how the atmosphere works, but they never add it to their animation, you know. And if they do, the sun would never set as they claim it does. And we can prove that too.
Modern science claims that the apparent sun sets after the real sun because of the atmosphere and the effect of refraction. So when we see the apparent sun above the horizon line, that is just a reflection of the real sun, which is already set. But when we added the atmosphere to the globe model, it did the same thing that it did on the flat Earth model. The apparent sun goes down first, and the real sun follows it. That is contrary to the way refraction is normally presented.
So the atmosphere is something that we can't ignore. It's like looking at the sun with your glasses on. The atmosphere is like a lens with no cover. We are like fish in the sea, you know. So the atmosphere can change the whole view of the sun. Now, in order to prove this, we had to add the atmosphere to Steve's model, but the question was, how? It was not an easy thing to do, and by coincidence, Steve found out that his program is capable to model the atmosphere exactly how it is. So he took the data from the internet and built all the layers of the atmosphere, and suddenly the magic happened and everything started to make perfect sense. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The sun started to rise and set, and it started to match reality more than the globe model does.
With 3D software, you can model the atmosphere very accurately using refraction settings. We're not talking about drawing it and making it visible, we're talking about drawing the layers with their real effects on sunlight. Once I discovered it, I told my team, guys, we've got a solution. We can test the atmosphere's effect on the light.
After we had everything fixed, we started to compare it with real life. We actually took some real sunset videos and compared them with both the flat Earth model and the globe Earth model. And guess what? If you play the 3 videos at the same time, you would not know where the flat Earth model is because it really looks like real live videos.
Many scientists think that the flat Earth model can't work because it can't represent sunrise and sunset. What are they going to say after studying this proof? Is it going to make sense to some of them now? They can't ignore the atmosphere, and all we did to make the flat Earth model work was add the atmosphere exactly how science represents it. We didn't make it up.
Now, solving this problem doesn't mean that we solved everything. We still have a problem with the elevation angles, because the sun that we see is not in its real position. What we see is just the apparent sun. So imagine the real sun is here and the fake sun is here. The shadow that you're gonna get is going to follow the apparent sun and not the real sun, and this is not what we want. Okay, so the elevation angle that you're gonna measure with the sextant or with any other tool is not the angle of the real position of the sun. It's just the angle of the apparent sun. And we're still working on how to locate the real sun that we never see. Once we locate it, we will be able to get the exact elevation angles of the real position of the sun. And by doing that, we can draw the flat Earth map from scratch. I couldn't continue drawing the flat Earth map with the triangulation method that I talked about a few months ago, if you remember, because I found out that I was triangulating the fake position of the sun. So triangulating the sun from 3 different positions is like triangulating 3 suns at the same time, and that will never ever give you a precise number. So that is why I stopped plotting the map, and right now I'm just focusing on how to locate the real position of the sun.
When the sun is directly overhead, the refraction is near 0. But you still can't say where the sun actually is. As the sun travels towards the west, the atmosphere creates an image of it for every eye. So anyone who looks at the sun from the same angle as you, but from a different city, will see the apparent sun in a different position. But no one can see the sun in its real position. So if you try to triangulate the sun, you will never get the exact distance. This is like trying to triangulate a rainbow.
In the heliocentric model, Earth is just one of 8 planets in our solar system, all of which are said to be huge spherical Earth-like habitations or globular gas giants millions of miles away. They claim the Earth under our feet, along with these 7 other planets, all revolve concentric circles or ellipses around the Sun, hence the term heliocentric. The previously prevailing geocentric model had placed Earth as the immovable center of the universe, with the sun, moon, stars, and planets all revolving around us, just as they appear. In the heliocentric model, however, which would be more appropriately titled the acentric model, the sun is only the center of our solar system, while itself, supposedly, simultaneously, revolving 500,000 mile-per-hour spirals around the Milky Way galaxy, which itself is constantly shooting 670 million miles per hour away from an alleged Big Bang creationary explosion at the beginning of time. In the geocentric model, the 7 planets were known as wandering stars, with the multitude of other stars known as fixed stars. The wandering stars were so called because they can be seen meandering their own unique paths around the heavens, while all the other stars remain fixed in their steady group rotation around Polaris. The wandering stars also happen to be among the brightest in the night sky, and just as heliocentrists falsely claim the moon to be a mere reflector of the sun's light, they claim the bright starlight of these planets is merely them reflecting the sun's light back at us. This has already been shown to be geometrically impossible, however, as convex bodies do not and cannot reflect light in this way. In the heliocentric model, the wandering stars are all supposedly spherical Earth-like places several million miles away from us, while the fixed stars are all allegedly super-distant suns, similar to our own, but several trillion miles away, complete with their own solar systems and accompanying planets, perhaps even populated with sentient alien beings like ourselves. NASA's current official astronomical statistics state that there are upwards of 10 trillion such planets in our galaxy alone, and at least 200 billion galaxies in the universe. Therefore, they claim Earth is only one of 1 septillion planets in the universe. David Wardlaw Scott said, "Our modern astronomers imagine the stars to be immense worlds or suns, some of them many thousands of times larger than our own, and at an enormous distance." Sir William Herschel, in a paper on the power of telescopes to penetrate into space, affirms that with his powerful instruments he discovered brilliant luminaries so far from the Earth that the light which they emitted could not have been less than 1,900,000 years in its progress. Albert Smith said, "The fixed stars are so called because, except for very long periods, they do not appreciably alter their relative positions, and they are mere points of light, so small that the most powerful telescopes cannot magnify them into disks, yet they are supposed to be suns of immense size removed by the astronomers to immeasurable distance away from us for the credit and convenience of their theories." NASA even claims to have sent several remote-controlled flying telescopes, like the popular Hubble camera, into outer space, transmitting back to Earth pictorial proof of the validity of their model. These Hubble pictures show that the wandering stars are all in fact spherical Earth-like planets, just as the heliocentrists claimed all along. The Hubble pictures show that the fixed stars are also in fact distant suns, trillions of miles away, just as the heliocentrists claimed. The Hubble pictures and videos, all of which are indistinguishable from a good Photoshop or Hollywood production, completely confirm for hypnotized heliocentrists the truth of NASA's claims and the existence of various celestial phenomena which only NASA and their advanced cameras can show, like planets, galaxies, black holes, quasars, etc. Using even the most advanced non-NASA telescopes, however, the fixed and wandering stars appear to be nothing more than tiny dots of multicolored light. It cannot be ascertained whether fixed stars are actually distant suns, whether wandering stars are actually Earth-like planets, or whether any of NASA's claims hold any validity outside of their alleged pictorial evidence from these supposed remote-control flying space telescope images. Outside of NASA, what evidence do we have that stars are actually distant solar systems? What evidence do we have that planets are Earth-like places in space? They are certainly interesting and plausible ideas, but there is absolutely no empirical evidence to support them. In fact, if NASA hadn't implanted such ideas into their heads, very few people would ever look up at the night sky and assume those little pinpricks of light were all Earth-like objects millions of miles away, or suns trillions of miles away, complete with orbiting planets and moons just like ours. The only reason people believe wandering stars are Earth-like planets and fixed stars are distant suns is because of NASA propaganda. As Gabrielle Henriette said, the planets are not solid, opaque masses of matter as is believed. They are simply immaterial, luminous, and transparent disks. If stars are all distant planets or suns, how is it that various phenomena have been observed, including stars changing color, intensity of light, sudden appearance, disappearance, or shooting quickly from one place to another? I have watched single stars changing their colors as regularly as a disco ball, others shooting through the sky and disappearing, and stranger still, I once saw a star shoot quickly straight upwards through the sky for 2 seconds and then stop again. Back in the late 16th century, when the heliocentric theory was starting to take hold over the imaginations of an unsuspecting public, Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe famously argued for geocentricity, positing that if the Earth revolved in an orbit around the Sun, the change in relative position of the stars after 6 months of orbital motion could not fail to be seen. The stars should seem to separate as we approach and come together as we recede. In actual fact, however, after 190 million miles of supposed orbit around the Sun, not a single inch of parallax can be detected in the stars. Thomas Winship said, "In the time of Tycho Brahe, it was said that the Earth revolved around the Sun, but he argued that if the Earth revolved around the Sun, the relative position of the stars would change very much, and the matter must, in the nature of the case, be easily detected. Accordingly, experiments were tried at intervals of 6 months, and the result showed that the stars were in exactly the same position as they had occupied 6 months before, thus proving that the Earth does not move at all. If the Earth is at a given point in space on, say, January 1st, and according to its present-day science at a distance of 190 million miles from that point 6 months afterwards, it follows that the relative position and directions of the stars will have greatly changed, however small the angle of parallax may be. That this great change is nowhere apparent and has never been observed incontestably proves that the Earth is at rest, that it does not move in an orbit around the Sun." When Tycho Brahe demonstrated that after 190 million miles of supposed orbit around the Sun, not a single inch of parallax could be detected, heliocentrists, desperate to patch the glaring hole in their theory, pushed their hypothetical distances to the stars into the trillions of miles, claiming the closest one, Proxima Centauri, was a ludicrous 25 trillion miles away, and thereby making all the stars so conveniently far that no appreciable parallax could be detected. This expedient explanation, which heliocentrists have clung to ever since, has proven satisfactory to silence the manipulated minds of the masses, but still fails to adequately account for several issues. Dr. Samuel Robotham wrote, "It is found by observation that the stars come to the meridian about 4 minutes earlier every 24 hours than the Sun, taking the solar time as the standard. This makes 120 minutes every 30 days, and 24 hours in the year. Hence all the constellations have passed before or in advance of the Sun in that time. This is the simple fact as observed in nature, but the theory of rotundity and motion on axes and in an orbit has no place for it. Visible truth must be ignored because this theory stands in the way and prevents its votaries from understanding it. William Carpenter said, "Considerably more than 1,000,000 Earths would be required to make up a body like the Sun, the astronomers tell us, and more than 53,000 suns would be wanted to equal the cubic contents of the star Vega. And Vega is a small star, and there are countless millions of these stars, and it takes 30 million years for the light of some of those stars to reach us at 12 million miles in a minute. And, says Mr. Proctor, I think a moderate estimate of the age of the Earth would be 500 million years. Its weight, says the same individual, is 6 heptillion tons. Now, since no human being is able to comprehend these things, the giving of them to the world is an insult, an outrage, and though they have all risen from the one assumption that Earth is a planet, instead of upholding the assumption, they drag it down by the weight of their own absurdity and leave it lying in the dust, a proof that the Earth is not a globe. Several experiments have since been performed and repeated by notable scientists like Albert Michelson, Edward Morley, George Airy, and George Sagnac, proving that it is the stars that revolve around a stationary Earth and not the other way around. The conclusive results of their experiments are not contested or even mentioned in modern astronomy books. Rather, they are conveniently swept under the carpet to keep prying minds from seeing through the lies. For example, the experiment known as Airy's failure, since it failed to prove heliocentricity, involved filling a telescope with water to slow the speed of light inside. Usually, telescopes must be slightly tilted to get starlight down the axis of the tube, supposedly due to Earth's speed around the Sun. Airy discovered that actually the starlight was already coming in at the correct angle, so no change was necessary. This demonstrated that the stars move relative to a stationary Earth and not the other way around, because if it was the telescope moving, he would have to change the angle. Gabrielle Henriette said, "All the planets, including the Sun, revolve around the Earth. These circumstances cannot be denied since they are plainly visible, either in the ordinary way with the naked eye or with the help of the telescope. It can be said in this connection that in the case of a science which should be based exclusively on observation and not on speculation, such as astronomy, the evidence of the senses is the only factor upon which conclusions can and must be based. If the planets can be seen revolving around the Earth, it is for the decisive factor that they do revolve in such a way. It is asserted that this is not so, and it is maintained that the Earth and the planets revolve round the Sun. We note with astonishment, however, the bizarre and definitely suspicious fact that these planetary movements are not visible. They cannot be seen, and yet they are called real. How can these movements be proved and their speed be ascertained, since they are invisible? On the other hand, the existing geocentric planetary motions which can be observed and measured, and which consequently constitute a perfectly valid system, are condemned as unreal and apparent. A pertinent remark may incidentally be made on the subject. Why do the astronomical tables which are published year after year give the so-called apparent movements of the planets in the zodiac? Why take the trouble of calculating and putting them on record at all if they are not real? Why is it also that no mention is made of the so-called real movements of the planets? Marshall Hall said, "Trust your eyes and your cameras. They have no reason to deceive you about whether the stars are going around you nightly. Then get it in your mind. This single fact surrounding star trails that has been photographed thousands of times and cannot be denied must be explained away by the theoretical science establishment. All of the factless allegations, a rotating and orbiting Earth, billions of light-year distances to the stars, a 15-billion-year-old universe, the whole Big Bang paradigm, all of the alleged evolution of the universe, Earth, and mankind, that is to say, all of modern evolution-based cosmology controlling knowledge today, all of it, is completely undone if the stars are doing what cameras show they are doing, namely, going around the Earth nightly. If you can do so for a few minutes, just lay aside the Copernican indoctrination that accompanies such pictures and take a good hard look at these photographs of something that really, really happens every single night. Do you see what I see? I see all the visible stars in the northern skies going around the North Star in perfect circles. In other words, I see all the stars which these time exposures have recorded actually going around that navigational star that God put there for us in the northern hemisphere. In other words, the plurality of worlds, if there's supposed to be many, many ball planets spinning around in this infinite universe, that only makes sense in the heliocentric spinning ball cosmology. It's been shown that the Earth is flat and motionless, so the idea that there are many other Earth-like planets out there, or there are many other ball habitations spinning around in the sky, is ridiculous. You can see with a telescope that the things that they call planets look exactly like the things that they call stars, and before they started calling them planets, they were called stars. They were called wandering stars. If the planets are supposed to be masses like Earth, why is it that their starlight is often brighter than the other stars, which they claim are suns? Why would they have light at all? It's the same like with the moon. They claim to land on the moon, and they show this desert planet, but we look up at the moon and see a shining light coming from this disk. If the moon is so bright, shining with light like that, why weren't the astronauts constantly illuminated by this huge light that shines all the way 238,000 miles to the Earth? But then when they're on the moon, it's just dirt. When you look at these things through an actual telescope, they just look like disks of light. They don't look at all like suns or like ball planets. And when you take a good look at what NASA is feeding you, it's CGI. All the ball planets, every shot that NASA shows of Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, did I miss any? All these things, all their pictures of these planets are clearly made on a computer. They are CGI, computer graphic images, computer generated images. So, the idea that there are many other spinning ball planets out there in the sky is false. NASA doesn't do science. NASA does science fiction. Heliocentricity is not science. It's science fiction. Geocentricity is what you actually experience. It's what actually happens. The flat Earth is what you actually experience. You do not experience a curve. You do not experience motion. You don't feel yourself moving 1,000 miles an hour. The stars don't change their relative positions. They're fixed because they're revolving around us just as it appears. Think about it. If we were revolving around the sun, and the sun revolving around the galaxy, and the galaxy revolving around the universe, guess what? All the stars would change their position every single night. You wouldn't be able to catch the same star trails 2 consecutive nights, let alone for hundreds and hundreds of years, not changing positions. If you had those 4 different motions, everything spiraling around each other, you can't have the North Star fixed and all the other stars fixed in their constellations revolving perfect circles around it. Can't happen. You couldn't even have perfect circle star trails. They would be spirals. They would be awkward spirals. They would be like elliptical spirals. So, point is, Earth is not a planet. It's a plane. They just added a T to the end and fooled everyone.
So they're all trying to figure out, is the universe spinning around us, or are we spinning around the universe? That's always the fucking, that's always been, we think like I always thought, oh, they're dumb back then. They thought the world was the center of the universe and all that shit. And you look back at that, you don't really look into, unless you know the actual timeline. It's crazy hearing all these scientists going back, and you hear them explaining how it all went down. Once you go through the whole story of what we think about space and all, they tell you, we don't know shit. We're looking at a bunch of lights in the goddamn sky. You're gonna tell me that light and that light that's 100 trillion light years away? How the fuck did you figure that out?
Well, don't they have an explanation for that shit?
No, exactly. That's what you just said right now. What you just said now is what everyone's natural reaction. Because anytime someone says anything about space, you automatically think Someone figured it out. You don't know the guy's name. You don't know the name of the experiment. You didn't look into it yourself. You just think when someone tells you, how far is the Earth from the sun? They'll say, 93 million miles away. Like you just,
Right.
you
Googled it.
everybody relies on someone figured that out and someone double checked it. Dude, it's math.
Right.
It's science. It's math. But no one really knows. You're going on what you read and whatever hits you first.
You mean no one like that we're talking to?
Yeah, like, I don't
Obviously,
know.
Someone
I mean, if
has
I
been
told you-
measuring this stuff.
Yeah, if I told you,
I don't know how they
yeah,
measure
if I
it,
told
but I'm
you
sure
right
there's like
now-
a logical method of measurement.
For 1,000 years, from roughly 500 AD to 1500 AD, the civilized world was controlled by Rome. But not military Rome, religious Rome. The Roman Empire had mutated from a military power into a religious one, co-opting the beliefs of Christianity and mixing them with ancient Egyptian, Greco, and Babylonian paganism. Christian doctrine that came directly from Jesus Christ and was transcribed in the Bible stated that each individual had the liberty and independence to govern their own salvation by cultivating a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. The new religious Roman Empire insinuated herself in between Christ and the believer and said if you wanted to have your soul saved, you had to rely on the priests, bishops, and cardinals of Rome. This was the worst kind of slavery because it was a slavery of disinformation. Now and again, sincere Bible-believing Christians like the Waldensians of the Alps, the Albigensians, Jerome of Prague, John Wycliffe and his Lollards, Jan Hus of Bohemia, would rebel against this Roman rule and show Christians that Vatican doctrines claiming that you needed Rome to ensure your salvation were contradicted by the Bible. As a result, the papacy strictly forbade Bibles to be placed into the hands of the common person and only allowed Jerome's Latin Vulgate to be handled by clergy. Men like John Wycliffe painstakingly translated the Vulgate into the language of the people. For Wycliffe, it was English. English Bibles were then slowly and carefully copied and handled by Wycliffe's followers, who handed them out to and taught the people. In response, Roman authorities captured Wycliffe's followers, called Lollards, tied their Bibles around their necks, and burned them alive. It's what so-called Christian Rome did to all of her enemies, including Jerome of Prague and Jan Hus. John Fox's Book of Martyrs, originally titled Acts and Monuments, is completely filled with examples of Catholic authorities torturing and murdering Christians. And when a Lollard was burned with a Bible hanging around his neck, it was a terrible loss, because not only were Christians being burned alive, but hand-copied Bibles were irreplaceable. But in 1517, a new rebel stepped up, an Augustinian monk from Germany named Martin Luther. Luther was furious that Pope Leo X, Giovanni de' Medici, from the powerful Medici family who helped to rule the world then and including through to today, had sent their attack dogs, the Dominicans, to cheat the common people out of their money by claiming they could buy what is called an indulgence, which is basically a receipt of forgiven sin. By paying money to indulgence peddlers like Johann Tetzel, poor Christians believed that they had some of their sins forgiven. Worse, they were told that dead loved ones were in purgatory, and they could give money to these indulgence peddlers, and the Pope would then release their dead loved ones. Luther wrote 95 short paragraphs or theses, and on November 1st of 1517, All Saints' Day, posted them to the doors of All Saints Cathedral in Wittenberg. But what was different about Martin Luther's protest and the protests of previous Christians was the movable type printing press of Johannes Gutenberg. The 95 theses were translated and replicated by the Gutenberg press and spread like wildfire. Martin Luther instantly shot to number 1 on the Vatican hit list. Now remember, he was an Augustinian monk, but that didn't matter. He was waking people up and freeing them from the Roman chains, and for that he needed to be stopped. He was kidnapped by his benefactor, Frederick the Wise of Saxony, and held at Wartburg Castle for several months to protect him from Vatican assassins. During that time, he translated the Bible into vernacular German, and it may have been the most important thing he ever did, starting with the New Testament and then later the Old Testament. But now the Gutenberg Press started printing off large quantities of common language Bibles, and the fires of the Inquisition couldn't keep up. Other brave Christians, like William Tyndale, also a Roman Catholic priest, began translating Bibles into the language of their people. Tyndale was English, like Wycliffe, and he too was eventually executed by Rome for his crime. But now Rome had a problem. There were too many Bibles and Bible translators to be kept in check by burning them all. A new tactic was born, a tactic that English Cardinal Thomas Wolsey called learning against learning. And that tactic was to discredit the Bible in order to force people to return to accepting Rome as the ultimate authority over their body and soul. In this tactic of learning against learning, Rome would literally rewrite reality and weave a false reality matrix that we now all swim in to this day. For thousands of years, mankind understood the earth to be flat and stationary. Only rarely did men like Pythagoras attempt to claim otherwise. And it's interesting to note that many Freemasons consider Pythagoras to be one of the first of their craft. But now rewriting our reality as a tactic to discredit the Bible became a top priority in the face of Martin Luther's 1517 Reformation, Protestant Reformation. The Catholic response would be the Counter-Reformation, and it would be spearheaded by a Spanish Templar knight named Ignatius of Loyola and his followers, whom we call today the Jesuits. Their first opportunity came from the Vatican's mathematician, a Polish priest named Nicholas Copernicus. Copernicus gave birth to the modern heliocentric model of the universe with his work De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. Copernicus knew he was weaving a matrix of lies and wanted to hold publication of De Revolutionibus until after his death. But powerful Roman Catholic clergy like Tiedemann Gies, Bishop of Culm, and the papal secretary himself, Johann Wiedmanstadt, forced him to publish in 1543. The facts that Catholic clergy forced Copernicus to publish, or that Copernicus was the Vatican mathematician, or that he received his doctorate in canon law from Bologna University. Canon law are the precepts by which Rome governs nations. Adam Weishaupt was a doctor in canon law. Or that he was a Roman Catholic priest. These have all been swept under the carpet. But Copernicus never married, and even the Catholic Encyclopedia had to note that in 1537 King Sigismund of Poland put Copernicus's name on the list of 4 candidates for the vacant episcopal seat of Ermland, which makes it probable that at least in later life he had entered the priesthood. Also swept under the carpet has been the timing of the publication of De Revolutionibus, right on the heels of Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation. And if that's not clear enough for you, how about this? A Vatican agent named Georg Joachim Redicus, who was originally born Georg de Porus, had insinuated himself into the Luther Reformation and was in Wittenberg when he left to become a close student of Copernicus. Sources like Wikipedia claim that Redicus was sent from reformer Philip Melanchthon, a dear friend of Martin Luther, but it is absolutely Roman Catholic disinformation. In the Table Talk of Martin Luther, the great reformer is quoted as having said, "There is talk of a new astrologer who wants to prove that the earth moves and goes round instead of the sky, the sun, the moon, just as if somebody were moving in a carriage or a ship might hold that he was sitting still and at rest while the earth and the trees walked and moved. But that is how things are nowadays. When a man wishes to be clever, he must needs invent something special, and the way he does it, he must needs be the best. The fool wants to turn the whole art of astronomy upside down. However, as Holy Scripture tells us, so did Joshua bid the sun to stand still, and not the earth." In his lectures on the book of Genesis, Luther said, "We Christians must be different from the philosophers in the way we think about the causes of these things. And if some are beyond our comprehension, like those before us concerning the waters above the heavens, we must believe them and admit our lack of knowledge rather than either wickedly deny them or presumptuously interpret them in conformity with our own understanding." The great reformer Jean Calvin, also known as John Calvin, called Copernicus a dreamer who has a spirit of bitterness and contradiction, reprove everything and prevent the order of nature. "We will see some who are so deranged," Calvin said, "not only in religion, but who in all things reveal their monstrous nature, that they will say that the sun does not move, and that it is the earth which shifts and turns. When we see such minds, we must indeed confess that the devil possesses them, and that God sets them before us as mirrors in order to keep us in his fear. So it is with all who argue out of pure malice, and that happily make a show of their imprudence. When they are told this is hot, they will reply, no, it is plainly cold. When they are shown an object is black, they will say, no, it is white, and vice versa. Just like the man who said that the snow is black, for although it is perceived and known all to be white, yet he clearly wished to contradict the fact. And so it is that they are madmen who try to change the natural order, and even to dazzle eyes and benumb the senses. Do you think Calvin knew how the Freemasons were used by the Jesuits? When they are shown an object as black, they will say it is white.
We're talking about our government here.
No, we're talking about a crime, Bill, pure and simple. Y'all gotta start thinking on a different level, like the CIA does. Now we're through the looking glass here, people. White is black, and black is white.
Very quickly, Rome jumped upon this new model of the universe, and Jesuits like Christopher Clavius used Copernicus and his work to fabricate the Gregorian calendar, the calendar we all use. Rightly did the prophet Daniel say in chapter 7, verse 23, that during his vision a being standing near him said, "The fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it into pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall rise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and intend to change times and laws. And the saints shall be given into his hand for a time." Very quickly did Rome and papal agents like the Jesuits begin to push this new cosmology. She took over astronomy and either pushed out or killed off anyone who contradicted the idea that the Earth was a globe spinning in space and revolving around the sun. Even those that met her halfway didn't keep her happy, and she dealt with them as well. Teague Ottenson Brahe, whose nickname was Tycho, accepted the idea that the Earth was a globe spinning in space, but still believed that his own observations and data proved that the Earth was the center of the solar system and not the sun. This is known as geocentrism. Tycho wanted to follow in the steps of Martin Luther and studied at the University of Wittenberg, but was forced out by the plague. Brahe's life appeared to be frequently in danger, and in 1566 he lost a large portion of his nose in a duel. He was 20 years old at the time. He later died under mysterious circumstances at the very young age of 54. One of those who claimed it was simply an illness, a bladder infection contracted during a banquet in Prague, was his understudy Johannes Kepler. Kepler was a German astronomer and supposedly a Lutheran, yet he had an intimate relationship with Jesuits. In 1597, Archduke Franz Ferdinand II of Austria banished all Protestants, good Roman Catholic that he was, and Kepler fled to Hungary. But the Jesuits intervened and convinced Ferdinand to allow him to return. Kepler grew up with a Jesuit uncle under the same roof of their house in Wilderstadt. Uncle Sidaldus was a Jesuit astrologer who also kept a wife. Upon the unexpected death of Tycho Brahe, Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II immediately promoted Kepler to replace him as imperial mathematician. and Kepler very quickly went to work, rewriting all of Brahe's observations to be interpreted as heliocentric and not geocentric. In a paper titled Kepler's Relation to the Jesuits, Dr. Jörg Schuppner at the University of Leipzig noted that it is well known that the order of the Jesuits was the most important and the most active Catholic order in the field of science during the 17th and 18th centuries. One field of particularly intensive successful study carried out by the Jesuits was astronomy. Many of their names are associated with the important discoveries in the history of astronomy, such as the discovery and mapping of moon craters. It is nearly impossible to list all the names of those who made serious contributions as astronomers or mathematicians. One aspect of the considerable role the Jesuits played in the history of astronomy was their support of Johannes Kepler. Some of them stood in extensive correspondence with Kepler. Now, it was obvious to protesters like Luther and Calvin that something fishy was going on in Rome, and the papacy needed plausible deniability while she rewrote our reality. That propaganda was presented by Italian astronomer and mathematician Galileo Galilei, and it's absolutely fascinating what user-edited Wikipedia says. In the entry for Galileo Galilei, under the subtitle Galileo, Kepler, and Theories of Tides, Cardinal Bellarmine had written in 1615 that the Copernican system could not be defended without, quote, a true physical demonstration that the sun does not circle the earth, but the earth circles the sun. Galileo considered his theory of the tides to provide that required proof of the motion of the earth. Now, there's no link on the name Cardinal Bellarmine, which is unusual for Wikipedia. Maybe that's because Cardinal Bellarmine was Robert Bellarmine of the Society of Jesus, one of the most powerful Jesuits of his time, who was canonized as saint in 1930 and named a doctor of the church. What's more, it is ludicrous to imagine that the Earth's supposed large mass doesn't pull the moon and crash into it, and instead the magical force of gravity holds it stationary. Even more ridiculous is the idea that the moon affects tides by pulling on the water. Again, the magical, mystical force of gravity is blamed. South African author Thomas Winship wrote in 1899 his book Zetetic Cosmogony. If the moon lifted up the water, it is evident that near the land the water would be drawn away and low instead of high tide caused. Again, the velocity and path of the moon are uniform, and it follows that if she exerted any influence on the Earth, that influence could only be a uniform influence. But the tides are not uniform. And Winship uses examples from South Africa. At Port Natal, the rise and fall is about 6 feet, while at Beira, about 600 miles up the coast, the rise and fall is 26 feet. This effectually settles the matter that the moon has no influence on the tides. But Protestant reformers were on to Rome. She knew she needed a smokescreen, and she provided it. Suddenly, history was rewritten, and rather than pushing with her own agents, like Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and others, to rewrite our cosmology, suddenly, the papacy was a defender of the flat earth. Well, just look what they did to poor Galileo. Let's do. Supposedly, Galileo was tried for heresy at the hands of that evil flat earther, Jesuit Robert Bellarmine. He bravely stood by his guns and humiliated the church with a heliocentric spinning ball earth. What happened to Galileo Galilei? Well, for the last few years of his life, he was put under house arrest. Have you read anything about the Inquisition? Do you know what the Inquisition did to people when it truly considered them an enemy? Things like rotating their arms backwards until they were pulled out of their sockets, inventing special instruments that could be jammed into a person's body to rip open their bowels, putting them in a special sarcophagus filled with spikes that would jam into them to the bone. Did you ever hear of Edgar Allan Poe? Are you familiar with his short story, The Pit and the Pendulum? About a swinging razor-sharp pendulum that lowered across a victim and would take hours to slowly saw that victim in half. Did you know it was based upon the Inquisition? A little-known secret is that the Jesuits now own astronomy. When their missionaries went across the world, across our flat earth, the first thing they did was insinuate themselves in royal courts to become the official astronomer of that kingdom. China is a great example. One of the first Jesuits in China was Matteo Ricci. Ricci and his successors like Adam Schall and Ferdinand Verbiest were all the royal court astronomers and eventually fabricated the calendar for the Chinese emperor. Today, the Jesuits even have their own observatories both in Italy and in America. They use their puppets in American government to steal Apache holy ground on Mount Graham in Arizona. Are they reaching out extraterrestrially or interdimensionally? They appear to have answered our question with the latest piece of technology on Mount Graham, the Large Binocular Telescope Near-Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research, also known as Lucifer. And it's not surprising given the success the Jesuits have had in rewriting our reality. Now, we're supposed to believe that Rome was against the spinning ball Earth heliocentric cosmic accident cosmology of our modern understanding. Yet at every step of the way, Jesuits or Jesuit agents were there to bolster our false reality, hiding whenever possible behind convenient Jews. And for more on that, see our special report, It's the Jews, from Johnny Cerrucci and Mi'kmaq. Needing to contrive an origin for our accidental existence that contradicts the Bible, Jesuit-trained Belgian priest Georges Lemaitre is the father of the so-called Big Bang Theory, the idea that first there was nothing and then it exploded. He was a close co-worker of just such a Jewish puppet, Albert Einstein. Einstein bolstered the Jesuit cosmology with his convoluted theory of relativity. The problem was that observations of both scientists and laymen weren't matching what so-called astronomers were telling us. And so Einstein fabricated the theory of relativity to claim that your reality was relative to the time-space continuum. It is purposefully almost impossible to understand. You're just supposed to trust science and astronomy. The Jesuits then jumped on with dinosaurs and Charles Darwin to claim the Earth is billions of years old. And wherever Darwin's theory of evolution had holes, Jesuits stepped up to fill the gap. Jesuits like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the father of the New Age, after fabricating the ape-like pre-humans that we supposedly came from, even students of evolution became concerned that there was a, quote, missing link between primitive apes and modern humans. A discovery was made in 1912 to bridge that gap. Having been found in Piltdown, East Sussex, England, it was named Piltdown Man. Unfortunately, it was also found to be a hoax. The skull of a small human with the altered mandible and teeth of an orangutan. Sometime later, paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould uncovered the father of that hoax, a Jesuit priest named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. There are many such examples in archaeology and paleontology, and yet no one asks, why would so-called scientists be fabricating evidence? The goal was to discredit the Bible, and it has been resoundingly successful. Without the spinning ball Earth, Darwinian dinosaur cosmic accident, the Bible is a science textbook. With it, critics laugh and question the Bible, and instead look to human authorities to save their souls, such as the Vicar of Christ himself, who is for the first time in Roman Catholic history a Jesuit priest.
A couple of years ago, I was asked to do a Bible study group. I'm thinking Catholics don't do Bible studies, you know. And to do a Bible study group in Houston. I'm going, Catholics definitely don't do Bible studies in Texas. To do a Bible study group in Houston with a bunch of astronauts. Astronauts, oh, I could do that, yeah. So I wound up at a dinner evening of about 12 couples, all of them astronauts and spouses. One of the guys, half of them were Catholic as it turns out, so much for Catholics not doing Bible studies. One of the guys came up to me and said, you know, I just want to let you know, I believe in the absolute truth that creation was made in the 6 days just as described in the book of Genesis. And that's my religion. I just want to let you know that ahead of time. And I'm thinking, you know, have you actually read Genesis? Where it says the world is flat and it's covered with a dome and there's water above and below the dome, you know. Where does the shuttle go? How come you don't get wet? But then he told me a little bit more. He said, you know, before he was an astronaut, he was a test pilot. Test pilots, you don't want to have the habit of creatively reinterpreting their written instructions. Just another owner's manual. Because that's the way they view the world. Whereas in the ancient world, you know, what are the oldest books we have? The Iliad, the Odyssey, they're poems. They're books of poetry. And the world was interpreted in terms of metaphor and simile. And of course, the crazy thing is, science itself is metaphor and simile. Newton's equation for the fall of a rock due to the laws of gravity is a poem. It says the path of this falling rock is like the solution to this equation. It's not that they're the same thing. In solution to this equation. It's
not that they're the same thing.
You know, the sad thing of that statement about evolution being proved, evolution is not going to be proved. Nothing in science is ever proved.
Nothing in science is ever proved.
Science describes, it doesn't prove. I've got two really thick books on my shelf back in Castel Gandolfo. One of them is a Bible, and the other is a book by Misner, Thorne, and Wheeler called Gravitation. And this is, you know, about that thick, and it's all about Einstein's general theory of relativity. The Bible's 3,000 years old. The Gravitation book is 25 years old. The Gravitation book is out of date. It's obsolete.
The Gravitation book is out of date. It's obsolete.
Science books go obsolete. They're supposed to. You know, 1,000 years from now, our science, our understanding of evolution, our understanding of the solar system, our understanding of the Big Bang is going to be completely different than what it is now. I hope.
Are you saying, though, that then the problem is that on one level, science is dominated by these kind of fundamentalist techies who can't read a text other than in a fundamentalist way?
There is an element of that. I wouldn't say it's dominated by it.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing is most religious people are not arch creationist fundamentalists. Most evangelicals are not. But those are the ones you see on TV. You know, the sad thing of that statement about evolution being proved, evolution is not going to be proved. Nothing in science is ever proved. So I'm thinking, you know, have you actually read Genesis? Where it says the world is flat and it's covered with a dome and there's water above and below the dome, you know. Where does the shuttle go? How come you don't get wet?
So there you have the top Vatican official right next to the Pope advising him about astronomy, telling everyone that to interpret the Bible and just what it says the earth is flat. Now here we have over 35 lunar craters that are named after Jesuit astronomers. These guys have been rolling and telling the story of our cosmology about a heliocentric Earth for 500 years, portraying themselves as the bad guys.
I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
I understand that now that you're working with the Arnold Bread Company in charge of frozen foods. Now, is there any future for frozen foods down these frozen extremities?
Well, I think the human race can be helped by that. This was thought out by Dean Arnold, who's, in my opinion, a great humanitarian. He learned that we went down there after 4 or 5 years and finished a meal that we had left there on the table when we had evacuated Little America. Everything was perfect, including the bread. So he got the idea of this frozen bread, and already he sent some to Europe, and it worked very well over there for some of the starving people. So you can store it down in the Antarctic and against the lean years, and you wouldn't have any people in the world really starving if you did that.
Yes, in the event of an atomic war...
You'd stay there forever.
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
Well,
it was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
is it any secret, is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go.
Is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau, 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents that are slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there. So there's that big difference between the top and bottom of the world. The North really isn't very cold up there on the Arctic Ocean.
Imagine a place so remote that it has barely been touched by humans. Such a place exists. It is the Ross Sea, a majestic domain in the vast expanse of the Southern Ocean, a great wilderness. There are just 4 months left in which to first strengthen and then secure consensus support for the protection of these iconic areas. Decisions that would really make history by creating the largest marine parks in the world for some of the truly last wild places on Earth. 116 days to ensure the integrity of these systems and their future for all humankind.
Now, a major agreement on ocean conservation today. Dozens of nations created the world's largest marine reserve, the bottom of the globe. William Brangham has the story.
24 countries in the European Union agreed today to set aside 600,000 square miles of ocean. The protection will take effect starting December 2017 and will continue for 35 years.
He's an interesting guy, man, and, you know, he believes it, so. Kyrie, the Earth is flat, right? Yeah. 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 So, whatever. That's news. That's news. Here we go.
Isn't flat. And by the way, this is called gravity.
It's understood that Hollywood sells Californication. Hey, Sergeant Barrow, while to break the spell of aging. Celebrity skin, is this your chin or is that war you're waging? Firstborn unicorn, hardcore, softcore. Dream of Californication. Dream of Californication. To the world, be my very own constellation. A teenage bride with a baby inside, getting high on information. And buy me a star on the boulevard, it's Californication. Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. In Cobain, can you hear the sphere singing songs off station to station? And Alderon's not far away, it's Californication.
The sun is not 93 million miles away.
The moon does not reflect the sun's light, it is self-luminescent. There is no outer space, no galaxies, no aliens, and no gravity. The Earth is not a spinning ball.
And NASA is full of shit.
The Earth is flat!
There's no curvature. Where's the curvature?
Nobody landed on the moon. Space is fake. The sun is not a million miles away. We live on a flat Earth, not a spinning globe. NASA is a scam.
NASA lies and the Earth is flat.
Superior mirage, really? The Earth is flat. Freemasons are lying.
It's time to let go of the spinning ball.
We have never been to the moon. We couldn't go then, and we can't go now.
Oops, the 1,000-mile rotation made me fall.
NASA's a fraud, space is fake, and the Earth is flat.
Have you ever been to Pluto? Don't go. It's a Mickey Mouse planet. Oh, and by the way, the Earth is flat.
God won't be hidden. The world is flat. He wants you all to know it.
The Earth is flat.
That sun is not 93 million miles away.
Safe to believe the Earth is flat.
Kevin, is the Earth a globe?
The Earth is flat and NASA lies.
The Earth is flat. I shall eat my hat. Oh, I haven't got a hat. I'll have to eat the cat. Of course it's flat.
Does it bother you? Because it bothers me too. You're not alone.
The Earth is flat.
Gravity abducted the ball.
Don't be afraid to question all you've been taught. I think you're going to find out for yourself that the Earth is flat.
And Chris Kemp here from Beaufort, South Carolina. I laid out the globe according to NASA's dimensions in AutoCAD 2016, and it's just not possible, my friends, because of sight distances.
We've never been to space. Earth is flat. It's a flat plane, and space is fake.
Hi, konbanwa, Faith Waters.
Hi, I'm Grant.
I believe the Earth is flat. Geocentric love.
What is this? What is this? Is that a model of the flat, geocentric Earth?
Earth is not a planet spinning in space. Earth is a stationary, flat plane in the center of God's creation.
Greetings from Germany. The Earth is flat.
Yeah, the Earth is flat. There's no doubt about it.
then the sun is not 93 million miles away.
The globe Earth spins in theory. The flat Earth rests on fact.
The Earth is flat.
Check out the facts. The Earth is flat.
Thinks that the Earth is pear-shaped. No, the Earth is flat.
La Tierra es plana. The Earth is flat.
We know the Earth is flat, but the secret's getting out.
It's flat.
There's a firmament.
It's flat.
Guys, I think I found the curvature in the Earth.
La Tierra es plana, simulacros que la Terra é plata, a Terra é plana. Die Tür die Erde Santa, die Erde ist ein Scheibe. Ich gebe des, the Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat on top of the world.
At the 360 and no curve.
I truly believe the Earth is flat.
NASA never went anywhere except possibly Uranus is the only thing I like.
Hey Zeke, say the Earth is flat.
The Earth is whatever the Bible says the Earth is. And I sure don't see any evidence in the Bible about it being a sphere.
With all the empirical evidence and after months of research, I'm 125% sure our Earth is flat.
Can you talk to yourself?
The Earth is flat.
Flat? No, really, it is.
It is what?
Flat.
There's no spinning ball, and there's no U.S. flags on the moon.
The Earth is flat, and that's the flat-out truth.
There is no water on Mars.
I'd like to say that it is 100% definitely flat. I've been imagining it for years, and they all knew.
The Earth is flat.
And the sun and the moon are the same size.
The Earth is not the globe, it is flat like my arm.
I began to open my mind about 10 years ago and question things. And as I pulled on that thread, it finally led me to question the globe model. And I am really wondering if the Earth is really flat. And as I search and have looked into it, I'm finding it to be so.
Space is fake.
Hello, I'm Darren Ryan. I've done the research and I believe that the Earth is flat.
People, wake up.
Use your own mind.
The Earth is flat.
Look around with your own eyes.
The Earth is flat. It does not move.
The Earth is flat.
My school books say the Earth is round, but I think it's flat.
No one's ever been to the moon. NASA has been lying to us. The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat. Definitely flat.
The Earth is not a globe that can be proven by no curvature. So what is it? It is flat.
Earth is not spinning. Earth is flat.
The Earth is
flat
as a
Matt
under a
cat.
Yo, Jared, the Earth is flat. It's always been flat. It will remain flat. It took them, the elites, 500 years to get everybody to believe it's a ball. It's going to take you less than 5 to get everybody back to the truth. It being flat.
There's no satellites up there. The stars aren't trillions of miles away that people can't really even comprehend. The planets aren't as big as they say they are. They're wandering stars, like the Bible says. And it's the truth. And you are speaking truth. And keep up the good work, bud.
Our Earth is not a ball.
I hereby declare that the world is flat and we never went to the moon. End of story.
Hello, hello. So yes, I'm with you. Earth is flat.
The Earth appears to be flat. It's all about fake space, no Hubble.
The Earth is flat, and I am not an actor. I'm from Mexico.
Earth is flat and not spinning.
Man, to all you non-believers out there, get with reality, dog. Flat Earth ain't a theory, homie. It's your reality.
The Earth is flat. It doesn't move. It can be proved.
I reject the lies of NASA and the false doctrine of heliocentrism.
Did you know that almost every scholar that has promoted a globe Earth has been a Freemason, and that rockets level out and NASA is a hoax because the Earth is flat?
Peanut butter and banana. It's simple. It works. Just like the flat Earth.
To say that NASA's bullcrap would be a compliment. So at least you can do something with bullcrap that's useful. The Earth is flat.
Hello, journalism and NISA. This is Wake the Sheeple 2015. Just letting everybody know the Earth is flat.
I saw the Chicago skyline from the top of a sand dune from Michigan. My whole family saw it. Came home, Googled it. Now I'm not a ball earther anymore.
Traveled half the Earth at least. Been on civilian and military flights. And I've always noticed that the higher we go in altitude, the straighter the horizon line becomes, strangely enough. So, until I'm shown proof, undeniable, irrefutable, unquestionable proof as to the shape of the Earth. And I'm not talking about cartoon pictures and CGI images and composite images. I'm talking about the real deal. So until that day comes, until that moment arrives, I'm going to tell you without hesitation. The Earth is flat. Flat as a pancake.
The Earth is flat.
Since 9/11, on Monday morning, in Newcastle, Australia. Looks pretty flat to me. What do you reckon? Flat.
I think there is a great possibility the Earth is flat and space doesn't exist.
The Earth is not a spinning ball.
Space is fake.
It's light years, but sights are near. It's planets that look like stars. Never question where you are. The sun sounds big, so it must be far.
The only thing balls have to do with the shape of the Earth is having the balls to admit it's flat.
I refuse to believe that I looked. Now I know. The Earth is flat and does not move.
The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat. The Earth is flat.
Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat.
Earth is flat.
The 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 Earth is flat.
Earth is flat. We know the Earth is flat.
The Earth is flat.
Our Earth is flat.
The 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 Earth is flat.
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 Earth is flat.